Thanks ever so, and welcome everybody for this afternoon's session, supported by the UKRI, but also in particular delighted to have Winckworth Sherwood Sovereign Network Group and obviously Oxford Brookes with us today as well. This is one of a series of happy hours that we do jointly with Winckworth Sherwood, and Charlotte, I'm really pleased you're here to chair this session. They've always been great fun, and I'm sure this one will be no exception. As Sally mentioned, this particular session is looking at the housing preferences of older people, and this follows hot on the heels of a UKRI funded piece of work with ourselves and Ipsos. Many of you may have even seen or been at the HousingLIN summits in London or Leeds, where Stephen Finlay presented on the findings. Well, we're going to go into a little bit more detail about that. We're going to think a little bit how this focuses down both in terms of ongoing research about housing people's decision-making trees, but also at a practical level, what this means for operators and residents themselves. So without further ado, you don't want to hear from me, you want to hear from Charlotte and the team. I'm going to hand over and say thank you very much, Charlotte, and really looking forward to this 111th happy hour that we've had since we started.
Thank you very much indeed, Jeremy. Welcome, everybody. Fabulous to have so many people joining us. I think this is a record, Jeremy. I've got 154 attendees showing on my screen.
We've got 300 registered, so even if those people who don't join us, they will see the video and the recordings at a later date.
Absolutely. Well, hopefully that means there's been lots and lots of questions going into the Q&A buttons shortly. Thank you very much indeed, everybody, for joining us this afternoon for today's happy hour, understanding the housing preferences of older people. As Jeremy said, my name's Charlotte Cook. I'm a partner in the social housing real estate team at Winckworth Sherwood. Today, I'm joined by a fabulous and illustrious panel. Firstly, my trainee, or one of the firm's trainees, I should say, Isabel England, will be setting the scene for us for this afternoon session, giving you a background to the Older Persons Housing Taskforce report and also the Innovate UK-funded Housing LIN and Ipsos report. After Isabel's done a brief introduction to those bits and pieces, she'll be followed by Alice Walker, who is a postgraduate research student of the built environment, who'll be talking about her research into this area. And then we're joined by Sarah Mitton, who is the head of customer engagement at SNG Network Group, and with Angie Chillingworth, who is chair of the group's Scrutiny panel, be able to give a much more personalised insight into various proceedings. We're really, really pleased to be sponsoring this. Winckworth Sherwood have been involved in Housing LIN since pretty much its inception, and a fabulous resource, as I'm sure all of you will be very aware. It's a great help enabling the work that we do to better serve our clients and their customers, and the fabulous research and policy information provided it's second to none, absolutely second to none. So without taking up any more of your time, you didn't want to hear from Jeremy, you didn't want to hear from me, I would like to pass over to Izzy, who will start her presentation for the background bits and pieces here. Izzy, over to you on your slides, please.
Thank you. I've just got the slides up. Should be sharing now. Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Isabel England. As Charlotte mentioned, I'm a trainee at Winckworth Sherwood in the social housing team at the moment. And I'm just going to take us all through the sort of latest research that's been done on older people's housing preferences and the decision making that goes behind that. So we move to the next slide. By 2043, 24% of the UK population will be over 65, sorry, me who's 25. An ageing population affects housing markets, services and policy planning. And consequently, the need for age-friendly housing options is critical for enhancing quality of life and improving well-being. Housing options often fail to support older people's needs, leading to issues with accessibility, independence, and well-being. In November 2024, the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government published the Older People's Housing Taskforce report. And complementary to that report, Ipsos and HousingLIN in December 2024 published the findings of a comprehensive survey of over 5,500 respondents aged 50 and over to understand the housing needs and preferences. We firstly look at the current housing situation of older adults. The results of the Ipsos and HousingLIN report found that 84% of adults aged 50 plus were owner-occupiers, with 66% owning outright. 46% have lived in their current property for over 20 years, and most live in conventional homes, with 44% in 3-bedroom properties. Additionally, it was found that many adults prefer to remain in their current homes, emphasising a desire to age in place. There were some interesting case studies from New Zealand and the Netherlands which demonstrated successful ageing in place models, which England could adopt. We now turn to the future housing preferences. The Ipsos study found that 47% of older adults prefer to stay in their current home, whether that means making necessary adaptations or maintaining the living arrangements as they are. The study also found that 58% expect to live in a smaller property in the future, with a strong preference for bungalows, especially amongst the age group of 65 and over. The government report found that there is a need for diverse choices, not just in specialist housing solutions, but also in mainstream properties designed with ageing in mind. This means incorporating age-friendly features into new builds, ensuring accessibility, and developing communities that provide social engagement and support. Both reports did find that there were several barriers to moving for older people. One of the greatest obstacles is affordability. Many older adults experience financial limitations, making relocation difficult. Costs associated with moving, such as estate agent fees, stamp duty, and legal expenses, can be prohibitive. Consequently, affordable renting, shared ownership, and leasehold options need to be prioritised to ensure accessibility for those on fixed income. Affordability issues are especially prevalent amongst social tenants and lower income groups, creating further challenges. Beyond financial concerns, personal attachment to one's home is a significant barrier. Leaving a familiar environment, especially where one has created lifelong relationships with neighbours, can be an incredibly difficult decision, and often resulting in hesitance or avoidance in moving altogether. Lastly, the complexity of moving can be overwhelming, particularly for those with mobility issues or health concerns. Many older adults with physical limitations struggle with physical limitations, which makes the process stressful and exhausting. Without proper support, relocation can become an incredibly daunting task. So the Taskforce report actually made 10 recommendations based on the findings of their study, which I'll just briefly run us all through. Firstly, standardising the definitions of OPH and LLH, which stands for Older People's Housing and Later Living Housing. Standardised terminology will facilitate partnership between the public and private sector, which will enhance public and professional understanding of the available options. Secondly, incentivising a wide range of options. Senior citizens are a diverse group requiring a broad range of housing choices. Community-led housing, upgrading existing stock, and culturally sensitive options must be prioritised to meet varied needs. Thirdly, ensuring more housing is designed for later life. Current housing stock does not adequately support ageing. Homes must be age-friendly, dementia-inclusive, accessible, and adaptable. Regulations should ensure that well-designed, desirable living spaces which promote independence and well-being. Fourth, building inclusive communities. Age-friendly housing must extend beyond individual properties to include supportive communities. Public spaces should be faith and culturally sensitive, promote intergenerational connections, and foster independence. Fifth, expanding affordable housing. The affordability of OPH and LLH remains a challenge. Expansion of cost-effective options will open up choices for those in the lower to middle affluence market. Greater incentives for public and private sector investment will be necessary to achieve this. Sixth, strengthening planning policies. Planning frameworks play a crucial role in development. National and local authorities must allocate sites appropriately, streamline planning processes, and integrate age-friendly principles into mainstream housing strategies. Seventh, establish a national information platform and local hubs. Understanding available housing options is essential to make informed decisions. A national information platform and local hubs will provide trusted guidance, helping older adults navigate choices related to right sizing, financial planning, and available services. 8, building consumer confidence. Trust in age-appropriate housing must be strengthened. Transparency in costs and fees will ensure that older adults and families feel confident when considering different housing options. 9, enhancing innovation, research, and professional development. A strategic approach to research, professional development, and innovation is required to pioneer new solutions that meet evolving houses' needs while supporting economic growth and social inclusion. And finally, 10th, creating a collective leadership to drive change. Effective change requires long-term national leadership. A dedicated office for ageing population has been proposed to ensure housing, health, and social care systems are integrated, supporting independent and healthy ageing. Following on from the Taskforce recommendations, both reports highlighted several opportunities for change. As previously mentioned, one of the greatest obstacles to moving is affordability. Consequently, adaptable and affordable mainstream housing and specialist housing should be prioritised. Future-proofing homes requires an emphasis on flexible modifications, enabling adults to adapt their living spaces as requirements change. New builds and renovations must incorporate inclusive design into their builds, ensuring that all housing remains accessible throughout different life stages. Housing solutions must be designed with accessibility in mind, ensuring proximity to essential amenities. Locating homes near shops, healthcare services, public transport, and green spaces allows older individuals to maintain independence whilst reducing barriers to daily activities. Recognising the diverse needs of older individuals, housing should incorporate features aligned with religious, cultural, and lifestyle preferences. Finally, a balanced approach supporting ageing in place and appealing alternative housing options is key. While many individuals wish to remain in their homes, others may seek purpose-built housing that better aligns with accessibility and community support. Providing a range of choices allows for flexibility and empowers individuals to make housing decisions suited to their needs. To conclude on my little intro summary, it's clear that from the findings of the report that the future of housing must reflect the evolving needs of an increasingly ageing society. I'll now just pass back to Charlotte, who will introduce the next person, I think. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you very much indeed. That was really, really interesting and lovely. Canter through the key points of those two pieces of work there. And a wonderful segue to Alice's presentation for us, particularly looking at the 9th Task Force recommendation there, the enhancing of innovation, research and professional development, particularly the research element here. So Alice, if I may hand over to you. And whilst doing that, people do please look into the chat. Sally's putting up some really useful links to various policy research and other bits and pieces. So do have a look at those afterwards. If you've got questions, if I could ask you to put them into the Q&A box, that would be great, and we'll pick up those when we've finished our presentations. Alice, over to you.
Thank you very much. We've had a little bit of an IT problem. So when I shout the word slide, it's not a general command, so just ignore it. But I will be shouting slide. Okay, so do a little bit of... Okay, so well, thank you very much for HousingLIN for having me here today. My name's Alice Walker. I'm a PhD student at Oxford Brookes University, but in a previous life, I was a housing practitioner in a local authority where I set up and ran a later life housing advice and information service, initially part of the First Stop programme, for those that remember it. So my research looks at later life housing decision making. So what are the barriers to decision making, and what factors might aid or facilitate it? And today we're looking at a couple of the key points. Slide. So one of the main barriers, as we kind of just referenced there, to even talking about later life housing, let alone decision making, is the language that's used to describe the different models, and it's all over the place. This is something that was flagged in, very clearly in the Housing Taskforce report. And there's been various suggestions over the years as to kind of standardisation. ARCO have their suggestion, their kind of 3 models. The Taskforce have their housing typology. But at the moment, it's entirely possible that 2 people could be having a conversation about the same housing type and never realise it. In addition to this, the age at which later life housing starts is also really unclear, with providers' age criteria ranging from 50 to 70, which is a massive range. And this is really problematic because it's hard to ask for something if you don't know what it's called. Slide. It's like the middle-aged woman I heard about recently who was going to get a coffee and she suddenly had those brain moments where you just can't remember something and she forgot the word for iced. So she ended up going in and asking for a latte on the rocks, which does sound really, really nice. And it's kind of like, hopefully she got something that was akin to what she wanted because she could describe it in some way. But given that there are about as many terms to refer to later life housing as there are, options on a Starbucks menu, it doesn't make for an easy starting point. And this matters because language matters enormously. Not only does it give us the key to the menu, but it outlines the boundaries of what we find tolerable. I personally have an absolute loathing of pumpkin spice lattes. I cannot abide them. But the fact that I know both what they are and what they're called makes it much easier for me to avoid them, to make a decision to avoid them. But if I was offered a warm squash and nutmeg milkshake, I might be tempted into making the wrong decision. The language used in relation to later life and aging in this country is deeply problematic quite often. Actually, in a study recently of ageist language used online, the UK beat 20 other countries. So we can't win Eurovision, although I think this year we have quite a good chance, but we can top the ageism charts. Slide. And I was actually thinking about this the other day when I was really hungry and I was watching jacket potato videos on TikTok. I don't know if anybody else has kind of got into them or wants to admit it. And it's where people in food vans serve jacket potatoes. In this particular video, this guy, he's very popular. He's got 4.2 million followers. In one of his videos, a chap called Brian comes up. He looks to be in later life, buys potato, gets given it for free. Great. But I started looking at some of the comments, and it kind of gives us a really interesting insight, I think, into how later life is perceived in this country. And it kind of ranges from the patronising, can we wrap him up in cotton wool? Oh, what a precious soul. I'd like to take him under my wing. Or look at his little grin at the end. You made his day. To the slightly more offensive, lights on, nobody home. He probably has no one and a touch of dementia. It made me cry. He doesn't know what's fully going on. And of those kind of 2 options, patronising or offensive, neither really appeals to me, although a free jacket potato actually does. And it's the same with the language used to describe later life housing. Sometimes it can be confusing, other times really quite problematic. Granny flat, warden controlled, sheltered, dead man's bedsit, which is quite a niche one, but I have heard it. And this isn't language of 20, 30 years ago. It's language that's currently used by both the general public and by practitioners. Slide. So why does this matter? It matters because when people are making decisions, they're involved in what I call future work. And pretty much all decision making involves this, even if the future is 2 minutes away and the decision is kind of what kind of coffee to have. In doing future work, people are imagining themselves in the future and trying to work out how it will make them think and feel. Because what people really want to know about the future is what their level of happiness and well-being will be. To do future work, to make decisions, people first of all need to know that an option even exists, because you can't imagine what you can't imagine. People then use bricks made out of things like language, experience, and beliefs to build a kind of future doll's house, and then try and work out how being in that doll's house will make them feel. Slide. And the problem here is, if the bricks that people are going to use to build their kind of doll's house are faulty, then their imagined future is likely to be faulty, and they're not going to be able to accurately put themselves inside it. And the bricks are going to be affected by things like not knowing where to get them from in the first place, not knowing what bricks to ask for, and most fundamentally, not wanting to be seen asking for bricks that are sticky with what's, the sludge of ageism. Slide. To engage with later life housing is to engage with later life. And as a society, we often don't make that easy or comfortable or desirable. Take age exclusive. This is a housing model that can be subject to stigma from the language that's very much used in relation to it, sheltered, ward and bedsits, to the image that it conjures up in many people's minds. 1 in 3 people believe that retirement housing is synonymous with an old people's home. So I say sheltered, you see a nursing home lounge smelling of cabbage, and that's both intolerable and rejected. To move into age exclusive, you have to be 50 or 55 or 60. And that means by moving in, you're outing yourself as 50, 55 or 60. And it's the same with modifications to the home. While putting in an ensuite bathroom, for example, might be seen as a home improvement and so be acceptable, installing grab rails or ramped access might read too much like an adaptation and be intolerable. One of the things that really surprised me about my research was that out of the 38 people that I interviewed, only 1 had accessed any kind of formal advice and information about housing. And it wasn't that people were looking for advice and information and couldn't find it. They just weren't looking for it in the first place. And as a former kind of practitioner, I was a bit baffled. And then I realized 98% of general housing decisions are made without using advice and information. And that means for many people, admitting that advice and information is relevant is akin to admitting they need help. That they're taking themselves out of the mainstream and into the realms of what a participant in some other research called the needy, the seedy, and the non-too-speedy. It's a great quote. And this is potentially a problem because later life housing decisions are different from those at other life stages, if only because of the very simple fact that there are options available at 55 that people don't have at 54. Slide. And yet, people do make active later life housing decisions. So what tactics do they deploy to pull away from this sludge of ageism? And it seems that there's 3 broad types. The first are those who are really good at future work, who are able to access the building bricks they need to build their dolls' houses, who are able to navigate through the problems of language, who are skilled at accurately predicting how they might think and feel. The next are those who are able to enhance their future work by using the experiences of others, often friends and family, to access solid building blocks. Of the people in my study who'd moved to later life housing, over half had friends or family living in similar housing models. The experience of others can open doors and cut through stigma. The third group are doing what I call passing. This is when people flip the narrative of what is a later life housing decision in order to make it more tolerable. So people who talk about moving into age exclusive, not for the age exclusivity or any of the features, which can actually be spoken about as a negative, but because it's a nice, affordable flat that just happens to be in a later life development. Later life housing is for others who may need it. They've moved to something later life adjacent. Slide. So what can be done to improve later life housing decision making? First of all, maybe what we need not do. It is not for power or practitioners or researchers or housing providers to speak truth to people. It's not for national or local government to tell people to think more, because the barrier isn't that people are unaware of the future. It's quite the opposite. What needs to change is how the future is conceptualized, the stories that are told about it, and who is telling them. Slide. So what is likely to help us? Confronting and challenging stigma around aging. So very simple. Getting the language right so that people can actually know what it is they want to ask for in the first place. We know that the wider the range of experiences we have access to, the more bricks we have, and the more likely we are to be able to build structurally sound doll's house. We need to increase the way we share experiences. need to get more people of all ages into later life housing spaces to see how they feel and how they look and how they affect us personally. Friends and peers can offer advice and information in a tolerable form. And people in later life are the subject matter experts. We'd all benefit from understanding how and what we do when we make decisions and developing tools for us to do that. As practitioners, we need to interrogate how we might be complicit in ageism and stop thinking about people in later life as anything other than ourselves in 5, 10, 20, 30 years. What we do now will directly impact our future selves, so we should be highly motivated to get it right. Slide. We can't stop time or change or aging. It's a condition in which we have to accept life. But we can change how we respond, how we think, and we talk about it. We can stop creating barriers and start creating tolerable futures. You can't stop the rain, but you can take an umbrella. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Alice. I'm slightly hungry after all of that. What with the talk of jacket potatoes and
a lot of food.
Spiced lattes. Thank you. Moving on, and Sarah and Angie, a bit of a double act coming up here. Sarah, I think you're going to do an introduction and then a conversation between the two of you as to what SNG is doing in this arena and maybe a bit more sort of a practical application by a provider in this workspace. So over to you if you can start your screen sharing. Thank you very much.
Thanks ever so much. Thanks for having me. And you should have warned me I was going to follow some really fun slides. I now feel like the boring follower pact, Alice. So sadly, no puppies on these slides. But what we wanted to share with you today is a little bit about how important it is to consider customer engagement across all the work you do when thinking about building people's voices across generations into a housing provider. So I am Sarah Mitton. I am Head of Customer Engagement for SNG. Although my slide is now not moving on, that's good. Oh, I'm ever so sorry. There we go. So I started with Sovereign Network Group back in November and previously worked for Carrion Futures as their age-friendly communities manager. So the reason I'm telling you that is because what I've brought into this post is a real passion for making sure that we listen to voices across all generations. And I know that the earlier we listen to people and the earlier we build voice into the work that we do, the less likely people are to reach crisis later in life and the more likely they are to be able to make informed decisions at the right time. So I'm really delighted that I have Angie Chillingworth with me today, and I will introduce her a little bit later. But Angie is one of our fantastic involved residents who's been supporting me to set up our new customer engagement model, which I'll touch on now. So for those of you that don't know SNG, this is our purpose. We want to provide good, affordable homes and a foundation for a better life. And this is just a little snapshot of who we are. But what I want to sort of highlight here is that we are quite a large scale housing association. We have around 85,000 homes that we own or we manage. And we are committed to making sure that we aren't just about bricks and mortar, but we're about how we enhance the communities in which our residents live. And so over the next 10 years, we are investing around £100 million back into our communities to make sure people are connected no matter what age. So just wanted to give a little bit more context that we weren't always the 6th largest housing association. As with many housing associations now, there are mergers, etc. And only 2 years ago, we merged with Network Homes to become Sovereign Network Group. And that has led to us having a footprint across a much wider geography and has also brought in lots of very different communities that Sovereign hadn't previously worked in, and similarly for Network. So as part of that merger, we have become also the 3rd biggest developer within the sector, and that's a real focus for us, is how we make sure that people do have access to homes across a life cycle. So I was very lucky to come in at a point when we were launching a new customer engagement approach. We want to make sure that everybody has a voice across all generations, across all geographies, across all ethnic backgrounds, etc. And I feel very privileged that I've come in at a point where we're really shaping that. So the reason why we did need to relook at it was partly because we have become a much larger merged organisation, and we needed to make sure that we were bringing on the very best bits of each of those legacy organisations to build our customer engagement model. But the other two kind of core reasons are that firstly, we have a very customer focused corporate strategy. You know, we want to make sure we understand our customers, but we don't just listen, that we actually then close the loop and make sure that we put them at the centre of decision making, but listen to the information they give us, how we can improve our services and programmes. When we want to be open and transparent in how we do that, which obviously is also being guided by the government through the consumer standards. So we very much have shaped our new approach focused on the transparency, influence and accountability standards. And you'll be pleased to know we've just had our inspection and we're waiting to see what the result of that is. But we really passionately want to make sure that we improve things and we continue improving things as our approach grows. So sort of our customer engagement work sits underneath the Better Together customer experience strategy. And that is, again, a newly launched strategy that has a kind of 3-year plan to make sure that we do create connected and thriving communities. And we're doing that, as I mentioned, through our community foundation that invest in projects and services within our communities, but we're also doing it through our resident engagement offer. And I'll talk a little bit about the digital platform that we've launched as part of this. So this is our new customer engagement framework. What we wanted to do is to make sure that residents' voices are as close to the board as possible. So we've set up 2 new panels, our customer engagement panel and our scrutiny panel. Angie is the chair of our scrutiny panel, and we have a fantastic chair of our customer engagement panel too. And both are invited to the board to feed back what those panels are discussing. And those panels have been set up to firstly hold us to account, to make sure that we're listening to what customers are telling us, that data and insight is being interrogated. And then the scrutiny panel are working on projects that are digging even deeper into some of the key themes and issues affecting our resident population. So what we do is we give insight and data through the regular surveys that we conduct as a business. We're gathering data through our Engage digital platform, which I'll talk about in a second, but we're also making sure that because we are large, we remain local. So we have a large but local approach, and we're setting up lots of thematic groups and localised engagement groups too. So just a very quick snapshot of some of the things that we collect. But the reason we do collect that is because we truly want to better understand what our customers are telling us. So we have lots of different ways of collecting data. We do some annual surveys, and we do some surveys that are linked to transactional moments that we have with our residents. And all of this is fed back into our customer groups so that they can hold us to account and ask really good questions as they do. So our customer influence panel was launched in January, and we have 12 members that sit across both legacy, network and sovereign communities. We wanted to make sure that we had a real diversity of voice across those groups, and that was around age as well as tenure type, geography and gender. And I think actually we did a really good job of making sure that we did have real, true representation of our communities within those panels. So already within the first 3 meetings we've held, we have started to do some more in-depth work around our approach to antisocial behaviour. We've been looking at grounds maintenance and what it means to bring services like that in-house, and been getting lots of feedback from residents. And Angie has been working on our first scrutiny around EDI and looking at the difference in satisfaction rates depending on whether you are male or female. So our scrutiny panel, I won't go into too much detail about this because in a second Angie's going to bring it to life for you. But we have 6 members again. We tried to make sure that we could be really representative through those groups as they are representing their localities. And without further ado, I will let Angie tell you a little bit more about that. So Angie, we would love you to tell us a little bit about why you wanted to join the panel, why you felt it was so important to have a voice in the way that you do.
I mean, I've only been a resident of social housing for just over 4 years. Never even considered going into social housing. I was living in a very small cottage in South Wales, quite happy. I have various disabilities and health conditions, but carried on working, and then due to health issues and also then my husband being very poorly, we had to look at how we were going to progress into our older life, if you like, both being sort of near to retirement age. My husband's past retirement age now. And the property that we're in meant that we couldn't stay in that property, unfortunately. So we applied for a more adaptive property for us to live in, and we also wanted to move to the beautiful Isle of Wight because that's where our daughter is, so that we knew we would have her support later on as we age. We were very lucky to be offered this property, and having had a career in vocational rehabilitation and as an appropriate adult for the police authorities, I felt that I still had a lot to give, even though I was retired and my health meant that, you know, I didn't want to do so much. I also felt that I had a lot of skills, a lot of knowledge and a lot of experience of working with such diverse groups, from veterans to elder people with learning difficulties and all sorts of bits and pieces. And I felt that I really had some skills that I could offer to Sovereign. So I applied to be part of their volunteer resident engagement, which I've now done for 3.5 years.
Thanks ever so much, Angie. That's really fantastic. And could you give us maybe a couple of highlights from your first few months as being chair of the Scrutiny panel? And I must just say that Angie has been absolutely amazing in supporting us to not just set up the panel, but really sort of drive it forward. But yeah, it'd be great to hear why it's been so important that people's voices are heard in this way.
I think it's really important because SNG are providing a service to their customers, and it's all well and good saying yes, we do this and we do that, but actually making sure that they do that. As a customer, I am their first point of call. So if they are delivering a service, I want to make sure that as a customer they get it right. And I think it's really important to also understand, I mean, if you take 85,000 homes, to think of that as a large town, that's a lot of people. That's a lot of people with different needs and different social situations and different physical needs and mental ill health needs. So there's a lot of people that Sovereign need to make sure that they are supporting, and if I can make sure that that happens and that they get it right, and I make recommendations with the rest of my panel, we do a scrutiny, we look at what is working well, what isn't working well, we look at other providers, other support, other housing associations to see where best practice is and hold them to account on that.
Thank you ever so much, Angie, and thank you for joining us. I know you were nervous, but you were brilliant as always. Thank you. So I'm just going to do my last couple of slides now, but thank you, Angie, for your time. We really appreciate it. So I just wanted to quickly touch on this idea of being large but local and making sure that we put multi-generational voices at the heart of our approach. So one of the things I mentioned earlier is that we have launched a new digital platform called Engage. So our kind of main aim with Engage and with all of our customer engagement is to make sure that there are as many diverse touch points as possible for people to have a voice and to support us to change the way we do things. And for many, digital is something that works really well for them because they can be doing it on their way to work or on their way to a social club, etc. So we launched this in January, and we've had the Scrutiny panel and the customer influence panel have put a survey through the platform already around what our letters should look like. And as a result of that, we've made changes to what some of our letters look like as they go out, and we've created a customer improved mark as requested by the groups to show that actually residents are being listened to in the way we do things. So we're very sort of early days with our platform, but we've had some great engagement so far, and we hope that it will be a really quick way of getting feedback from people and engaging people in in-person focus groups too. Another part of our new customer engagement model is setting up thematic groups. So groups that are kind of looking at some of the key themes or issues affecting our communities. So we again have been kind of working on this model since January, and we have 4 main groups that we've recently set up. One which is around looking at sustainability in our communities, another that is looking at how stigma affects those living in our social housing communities, and we've had lots of, you know, real honest conversations with our residents about stigma. And for those of you that haven't come across this brilliant report, this was written by a group of residents who attend the G15 residents group, and it just brings lots of different perspectives from residents on how we can take the stigma out of social housing, and that's led to a number of housing associations signing up to pledges to do better. We've also been involving our residents in some of our new contracts and looking at how we get the much younger generation ready to join panels and boards, because again, as we said earlier, the earlier you can engage people in having a voice and having a say, the better. And then I was just going to finish on our kind of final, our sort of motto in my team at the moment, which is that customer engagement is everybody's business. So we may be the customer engagement team, but for us, our biggest challenge, but our biggest opportunity is how we get the whole of SNG to think of customer engagement as one of their KPIs. So we have co-designed some training for all staff and a toolkit with a group of residents, and we have just been starting to pilot that. So what we want to make sure is that people are considering all those different touch points, as I mentioned, where they can be getting some feedback or listening or engaging with somebody, because we know that that could change that individual's life, but it could really give us those insights that we need to be the best business we possibly can. So I'm going to stop my slides there, but thank you again for having me, and hopefully you can answer any questions in a little while.
Thank you very much indeed to all of our speakers there. We'll move to our Q&A shortly, but thank you particularly to all of those who have taken part in this. Wonderful presentations from everybody there. Thank you very much indeed. So we're moving now on to the Q&A. Thank you for those people who put their comments into the chat and the Q&A. I'll try and pick up as many of those as I can whilst looping things together. And we'll be sharing these questions out across various people. And I've got some of my own as well to add into the mix there. Alice, if I can sort of come back to you. Request for you to share the research cited about the ageist language. If you could do that later, maybe Sally can make that available to all people on the call. What I thought was quite interesting is I think some of the references to the differences between adaptations versus improvements. How does that lead into the provision? We always talk about making age-appropriate housing or improving, allowing people to age better in place. And the talk is always about aids and adaptations, as opposed to, as you say, talking about improving properties. Is that something that you've picked up on in your research?
Absolutely. And I think, I say language shapes how we view the world. And we don't always think about that. I think we just fall back on stuff that we've always talked about, age and adaptations. And if you look at most, a lot of the kind of stuff around kind of grab rails or ramps, they look like hospital equipment. They don't look like the kind of stuff you want in your home, because we don't want our homes to look medicalized. We don't want, there are homes, there are safe spaces. So yeah, I think what we find is that people are really happy talking about downstairs bathrooms. They're not happy talking about raised toilet seats, because one of them is associated with aspirational housing, with normal behaviour, with improving our housing asset, and the other is associated with decline and frailty and all those bad things that we as a society are bad at talking about. So I think we need to be really careful about actually what's language. It's the same with things like aging in place. Very few people that I've spoken to talk about aging in place. They talk about staying put or living in my home. So we need to be sure that, I think, the language that we're using as, practitioners or researchers or housing providers is the right language, because if not, we've lost people before we open our mouths. But yeah, I think, our home is our castle. We don't want it to be a hospital, and nor should it be. So we need to be thinking about what those agent adaptations look like, and, making it palatable, because I don't want to be associated with, a white grab rail necessarily stuck on the outside of my house, which advertises the fact that it doesn't need to be like that either. We can do them in nice wood. So why don't we? But yeah, it's a massive problem.
Lovely, thank you. Very interesting. Link on to that, Jeremy, maybe I could ask you to answer this question. One of the more popular options in the Ipsos study was moving to a different home that has been designed to be accessible to older people from the outset. On face value, this seems to incorporate various types of older person's housing, extra care, shelter for retirement, etc. But this answer was a much more popular option than those. Could stage 2 of the study review how different forms of housing are described? Is this something that you and Ipsos could look into? Or
yeah, no, absolutely. I'll just build on, because I thought Isabel's presentation gave a really great sort of overview. But as I think as Ellen who asked the question, that was phase 1 in terms of the Innovate UK work with Ipsos. Phase 2 is to take that data and look much more granularly what that might apply like at a locality basis, mainly at a local authority level, and looking at a variety of different housing typologies, both from purpose-built specialist retirement housing or extra care, right through to more age-friendly, more care-ready style housing, which is mainstream housing, which is more age-inclusive. So yes, the type 2 will take a lot more of that data that we've pulled together with Ipsos and apply that at a local level across a range of housing typologies, and that's something we'll be publishing in the next couple of months or so.
Lovely, thank you very much.
Work underway at the moment.
As ever, the HousingLIN, great source of all this information. That's really, really helpful. I'm trying to pick up a few of the questions here, trying to pull a few bits and pieces together. Wonder if I can direct one to you, Sarah. You've talked about lots of data collection going on, and data collection across the whole of the SNG operation, shall we say. What do you do with that information? So we've talked about the various studies that are ongoing, and Alice's research, obviously fundamental to all of this. How do you share the information that SNG receive? Is it just internalised? Where do you publish this? Do you make this available to other G15 or other members, for example?
Yeah, no, really good question. So our tenant satisfaction measures, or our TSMs, are accessible to anybody, and I think all housing associations publish those so that you can kind of see the comparative data between housing associations. And we do have a sort of voice of the customer report, which gives an overview of our KPIs and TSMs, which again can be requested. And we do try and post some of the data onto our website, but it is something we've been looking at actually and consulting our residents around about how we make that accessible, because often data can be very hard to understand. And in fact, Angie and I have been on a call today about getting some additional training for our involved residents around how you read data, how you understand like what a baseline might look like and what's a significant change in data. So a couple of things that we've been piloting are we've been doing some video feedback that we've been posting on both our Engage platform and our website, that just gives like a short kind of oversight of some of the things that have been coming out of data or been looking at from a resident perspective. And we're hoping to launch a podcast in the autumn, which again, we want to create something that is just a very quick and simple way of listening to some of the things that actually can be quite complex for people. So yeah, hope that answers the question a little bit.
Thank you. No, very, very interesting. Maybe a question then to field. I won't field anything that refers to a younger person, to Isabel, because she is our representative here. But Alice, in your research, there's a couple of questions here. Is there any research being looked at on the older person's aspirations for housing options for the future, as younger people today may have different views on those who may be 40 or 50 now, i.e. renting versus owner occupation? And another related question, do older people not want to move out of their homes because there's nothing local for them to move into? Was there anything, Alice, that was drawn out from the research that you carried out that could help to answer a couple of these questions?
I was quite surprised. I was thinking I would kind of come across more references to lack of stock or financial implications around housing, and they were there, but they weren't the primary reason. The primary reason people weren't moving was A, because they don't want to, because they're quite happy living where they're living, and because, you know, as I said, I think fundamentally thinking about housing options in later life is very challenging for us. And we know within our society, we just don't create the conditions to allow us to do that. So when you get to that point of making a decision, it's then that you encounter the actual, you know, the practical problems. But for most people, don't even get to that point. They don't get to the point of thinking about later life. But yeah, there is a massive problem with, I think, especially with later life housing, the additional stigma sometimes attached to private renting within the later life housing market is still quite prevalent and quite interesting. But no, I think we need to step back first before we think about, well, obviously we need to think about stock and availability and affordability, but there's a step before that. And I think, yeah, you're right in terms of, I think someone mentioned it in the chat earlier on, that actually, if we think about later life housing beginning at 50, we are living longer, we're working much, much longer. We're misaligned in terms of where later life housing starts and where our perception of later life starts. Because if you say to someone who's working full time, really hard, do you want to move into a sheltered housing complex? It's just so completely at odds with their identity and sense of self and sense of place within society. So we need to kind of recalibrate everything really and think about what's tolerable and acceptable. Yeah, and I think as we, you know, become older, it becomes more apparent, doesn't it? You're like, oh, actually, that's me. It is about that's me. We have to have those that's me moments.
Yeah, I mean the 55 plus ranking was always based on pension ages and the earliest point at which individuals would look to take up their pension. But as we all know, that's being pushed further and further. But equally, no one size fits all for everybody. And again, we all need to be a little bit alert to lumping older people together as one group. The age bracket there covers generations, and of course people are not the same. A couple other questions. I'm slightly conscious of time. We've got a couple of minutes left to go. Jeremy, where's my question gone? Lots of questions. So how are the recommendations in the report? I think this is probably talking about the Housing Taskforce report. Jeremy, any update on what's happening there, you being a fundamental mover and shaker within that?
Officially, the task force has come to a close, and we've been disbanded. I'm aware that next week is the second anniversary of the establishment of the task force, so watch out for a little blog that I've prepared on that. But there is work behind the scenes really trying to look at both issues around accessible housing. There's been some conversations in the chat about M42, M43. I know colleagues on the task force and I have been discussing with the groups of architects about how may we create a fresh set of HAPPI design principles, which perhaps take on a bit more about technology enablement as well, which again was one of the questions I think in the Q&A box. So yes, behind the scenes there's a lot going on, both industry-led as well as some individual task force members taking an active lead in an area that has a particular interest to them.
Thank you. Well, you heard it here first, people. Look out for that. We'll be watching those briefings with active interest. Just a question, if I could ask Sarah. Firstly, how do you go about picking the panel members who wish to apply? And then Angie, maybe for you, that's my puppy barking, by the way. Angie, maybe if you could tell us, what was it that particularly drove you to want to become a panel member here? Sarah, can I ask you to go first?
Yes, absolutely. And I can take no credit for this because this was just before I started with SNG. But we did a call out through all of our channels for panel members. And I know that we were over the moon to receive over 450 applications from across our communities. I think one thing to highlight is that we do remunerate our panel members. So people are paid for their time representing SNG on our panels. And I think that's kind of made it a more accessible opportunity for lots of people who perhaps, may struggle to volunteer to get to those meetings. And I think actually it's brought like a sort of level of commitment, because it is a role that you are contracted to do, that there is an expectation of your involvement. I think that's been a really interesting exercise for us, is remunerating, but it certainly has worked. And then I guess in terms of the call out, we did it through all the channels that we possibly could to reach as many communities as we could. And I would say that, you know, during the interviews, we were very aware that we wanted to make sure that we had broad representation. And I think actually, you know, hats off to the team that did it, because they've done a great job of making sure that our voices are diverse. Angie, I'll hand over to you.
Perfect. Thank you, Angie. So why did you put your name into this ring?
Oh, why did I do that? Yes, no, I did it for two reasons, really. The first one, as I said earlier, I retired, but I don't consider myself an older person. I am retired, and but I don't consider myself an older person. But I still have a lot of skills. I still have a lot of knowledge that I think I can offer to SNG. Why did I apply for this role? That's a good question. I volunteered. I was a volunteer resident board member for 3 years, and then changed over to the old Scrutiny group, which neither of those roles were remunerated at all. So it was purely on a voluntary basis. However, I feel very strongly, as I said earlier, that for SNG to do their job, they have to listen, and listen hard, from the residents. And there are no parts of the business that are out of bounds. So as a chair of the panel, and my colleagues in the customer influence panel, we can ask questions that, I mean, if other residents want to ask us to get involved, we can do that. So there's lots of ways that we can actually challenge the work they're doing, make sure they're doing it properly, and make sure they're doing it for the voice of the resident.
Excellent. Thank you very much indeed. The last few minutes, just to wrap up here, Alice, when will you be publishing further results of your research, and will you be willing to share them with the wider group?
No. Yeah, so I mean, my research is part of my PhD. I'm coming to the end of that now. I actually submit in 10 days time, so very exciting. So yeah, though I'm looking forward to kind of, you know, working with anybody who wants to, you know, do any additional work around that, and some papers will be coming out soon, hopefully. So yeah, but if anyone wants to kind of look at anything else or wants any more information, do just give me a shout, and I'm more than happy to talk through any other aspects that people find interesting.
Excellent, and that brings us dead on time. May I finish before handing over to Jeremy to wrap up? Thank you very much indeed to all of my fabulous speakers and panel members. Thank you to all of those who've contributed to the chat or the Q&A, and all those of you who have listened and taken part. Fabulous to see you, and we'll look forward to hosting another event shortly. Jeremy.
And Charlotte, thank you for chairing so expertly. It's been a great pleasure to partner with you again. And on behalf of the Housing LIN, can I thank all our contributors this afternoon. A really fascinating presentation. And what really struck me is that we're not just about thinking about the housing preferences of people who want to move, but actually as anchor institutions, organisations like SNG have a large number of residents who either have a household with an older adult or somebody with a disability. And it's really important that we engage and listen to those needs, as Sarah and Angie have highlighted. So thanks again to a fantastic set of questions, some really great chat. Those will be shared along with the recording and the sort of feedback from this session this week. And thank you, Sally, for helping organise today's excellent happy hour session. I also just want to add very quickly that we're delighted to partner with SNG on a new programme that will be formally launching tomorrow. Some of you I see on the delegate list have been former members of our Future Leaders programme. If you're an early career individual and would like to apply to our programme, please do look out on our website tomorrow. In fact, I think, Sally, it might be live now, that we're looking for a number of new people to join our 5th cohort as we go forward. And please do look at Ellen and Faye's blogs if you just want to have an idea, and something Isabel may be interested, who knows. Anyway, it leaves me just to say, look forward to seeing you again all soon. Thanks again, everybody, for your contribution. And do join us next week when we'll be on Thursday, not Tuesday, as part of Dementia Action Week. And we'll be looking at housing, dementia, and dementia-friendly communities. So do hope some of you can join us again next week. We've just hit 5 o'clock. Over and out. Go and get yourself
Thank you.
Go and get yourself a happy.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you all.